Good evening, Mr. Sebastian.
Good evening, Counselor.
If a gun is fired or a gun goes off while it's in someone's hands, they would get GSR on them, right?
Yes, they would.
So no matter if they fired the gun on purpose or by mistake, if it goes off in their hands, they would get GSR on them.
Well, what we find is that intentional acts and accidents tend to leave different GSR patterns, but they would both leave GSR, yes.
GSR testing is very delicate, isn't it?
That's why it must be performed by qualified professionals such as myself.
And it's subject to many well-known limitations.
It takes a great amount of training to be able to do it properly, yes.
Someone who hasn't even fired a gun could get GSR on them, right?
Under very specific conditions, they would have to come across somebody who had fired a weapon in near proximity to them, but yes, that is possible.
For example, if a police officer has GSR on them and someone came in contact with that police officer, they could get GSR on their person, right?
If it were the case that that particular police officer had GSR on them, then yes.
And police officers are known to have heavy amounts of GSR.
It really depends. If they fired their weapon within the close proximity of coming into contact with somebody, then yes, that is possible.
Generally, officer, police officers are known to have heavy concentrations of GSR.
It is possible for them to, yes.
And you're aware that Jesse Duran came in contact with many police officers before you arrived at the scene on August 18th.
Yes, I'm aware that there were police officers who handled Jesse. To my knowledge, they had no concentrations of GSR that would have affected my conclusions.
Well, you didn't test all of those officers for GSR, did you?
No, I didn't find. Usually when we find contamination of GSR evidence, there are certain telltale signs, and that would prompt me to begin the testing of the officers. But since I didn't find those telltale signs, it wasn't necessary for me to test them.
You also conducted fingerprint analysis on the weapon on August 18th, right?
Yes, on the weapon, on the safe, and on the shell casing.
I'm approaching opposing counsel with Defense Exhibit A. I'm approaching the witness with the same. Now, you recognize that as the fingerprint analysis that you performed on the weapon on August 18th, right?
That is correct.
And this is a fair and accurate copy of that analysis that you performed?
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, at this time, defense moved Defense A into evidence.
No objections, Your Honor.
When you conducted your fingerprint analysis, you found fingerprints on the safe, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
And that safe had Sidney Park's fingerprints on there, right?
It had Sidney Park and Jesse Durant, yes.
Now, you also performed a fingerprint analysis on the gun.
Yes, I did.
And Sidney Park and Jesse Durant's fingerprints were found on this gun.
Yes, at varying locations, that's the case.
At point 1, that is where you found Andy Park or Sidney Park's fingerprint, right?
That's correct.
And at point 2, that is where you found Andy Park's fingerprint.
Yes, that's correct.
Point 3 is where you found Jesse Durant's right pinky.
Yes, it would have been something like this.
And at point 4, you found Jesse Durant's right index finger.
Yes, that's correct.
You're familiar with how a gun is fired, aren't you?
Yes, that's correct.
You know conclusively that at some point, Jesse Durant and Sidney Park touched the gun that you performed analysis on.
In my field, we don't use the word conclusion. It's just in bad form. It's a matter of form, if you will. But I do know, and must clearly, according to this evidence, yes, they both put their hands on the exterior of the weapon. That doesn't really tell us anything about who did or didn't fire it.
Officer Sebastian, yes or no? You know that Sidney Park and Jesse Durant at some point touched that gun, yes or no?
According to this fingerprint evidence, yes.
No further questions. May I approach and retrieve?